Thanks for listening. This is Brian Hurley from Business Performance Improvement. The podcast Lean Six Sigma Bursts are short lessons, comments, Q&A, and insights. If you have a question, send your question through the Anchor app, and we might feature you on a future episode. Or contact me at biz-pi.com.
For this podcast, I'm going to go through the 8 forms of waste, also called Tim Woods. Most of this year, I've been doing quite a bit of camping with my wife, and we have identified a lot of waste and inefficiencies in that process. So I thought it'd be a good example to share, since many of you might have some similar experiences. So let's start with the first one, T for transportation. An example might be not using closer campsites to your own home. So you're going longer distances, maybe you're driving a couple hours, and there might be a better and closer campsite near you. So that transportation might be excessive if it's not really a better campsite. Also taking an inefficient travel route to get to the campsite. So maybe there's a shorter pathway or a shorter distance, and your GPS takes you on a longer route. That's something to look at and see if there's a better route to get there. Also, placement of your campsite near restrooms. If you end up going to the restroom quite a few times in your trip, then the further distance away from it, then that's more travel time and walking you have to do. So there's some examples of transportation. You might be able to think of some others yourself. Next one would be inventory. So when we go camping, usually grab some groceries and supplies, but if I don't need them right away or I buy them too early, that's a form of inventory because it takes up valuable space in the van. Or I have to have a second cooler or pack the cooler full of stuff. And that's more things to rummage through. And it's more money out of my bank account that I could leave in the account a couple more days later. Another example would be taking more items than you need. Especially for things that are easy or quick to replace, like firewood or ice or drinks or charcoal. Those can be set aside and not have to be taken up as much room. It's nice to buy in bulk, it seems, but that can cause a lot of space restrictions in your vehicle. Also, at the campsites, there might be more sites available than are being used. So that can be viewed as excess inventory, that they're taking up more space from nature available for potential people to come and stay, but they're not. Also, there may be more parking spots that are necessary. So that's taking up more of nature to accommodate for unused parking spots. Campsites might be too big. A couple times we've noticed that it's probably more room than we need. We don't need all this excess space, and that's allowing fewer campsites to be available. But that space is above and beyond what's actually needed. If they were reduced that down, they could fit in one more space potentially, or 2 more spaces over the whole campsite, and still give you adequate space. There might be a camp store or ranger station, and there might be excessive items in there that are not needed right now. And so that could be inventory management and trying to make sure they have the right amount of things, but not too many. There's also a lot of stuff related to food and food preparation and cooking. That could be an entire separate podcast just on food and the 8 wastes there. So I'll mention some of these that pertain to camping, but there's also just generic food preparation and cooking that has all these wastes as well. So let's move on to M for motion. So I've got some containers in my van and supplies that I bring along. And the organization of those containers and supplies can lead to a lot of motion. So for example, I've got 2 containers that have kitchen items. And so trying to figure out which one has the right items we need is a lot of motion involved with looking to see if something was in there, taking it down, opening it up. Nope, that's not the right one. Put it back, grab the other one. Oh, there it is. Carry it over to the picnic table. All that is motion waste. And so what we recently did was combine that into one, so there's less containers, which could be another example of inventory. And then, so there's less motion. We just go and grab the kitchen one. We know there's not another one to look through, and that reduces some motion. So any kind of rearranging of things or looking for things, that would all fall under motion. And we found ourselves looking for stuff a lot. We're searching for phone chargers, we're looking for sunglasses, we're looking for lots of things that are highlighting some disorganization in our vehicle. You can also look at the container itself and say, do I have these organized, the items in the container organized in a way that's easy to find? And are they grouped together in some logical way? So 5Sing the items that you're bringing and 5Sing within each container that you might have. So there's a lot of moving of things around there. And if we get into cooking, looking at the order of steps to cook the food, right? First thing you want to do is probably get the charcoal going right away, because that takes a while for it to heat up while you're preparing. If you don't do that first, and you start doing the food prep and then you do the charcoal, then you're going to be waiting a little bit longer. But the order and sequence of doing those steps can make a difference. So if I do things out of sequence, that can take longer or create more motion. And it can create another waste later, which is waiting. So then what items to put on the grill at which time so that things get finished at about the same time. That's also part of motion waste. Also found ourselves talking to many different people to try to get information about the campsite. So you talk to this person and they give you some information, and then they direct you to somebody else, and then they direct you to someone else, and then that information conflicts a little bit with someone else's. That might be defects happening. So a lot of extra steps and motion to get the right information. In addition, just getting information, what do you do when you communicate a problem? We had an electrical outlet that didn't work. Who do I tell? Who do I contact? It was hard to figure that out. So we're asking this person, we're asking this person. I still don't know if it got resolved. I didn't feel confident that they had a good system for managing problems like that. So we just put a note outside of our campsite number. So outlet doesn't work, just to make sure someone maybe would see that. Okay, let's look at waiting, W. If you get to the ranger station, if everyone goes right when you can check in, there's usually a long line, so that's waiting. So trying to stagger or spread out some of the arrival times would be helpful. I try not to get there right at the beginning, just to avoid potential waiting. There might be, using the restroom, you might not have enough stalls or bathrooms available, so that can create some waiting. Also for like showers, there might not be enough showers available, so you have to wait. Sometimes we'll realize that we're going to be late arriving to the campsite, so we have to call and get the code if they lock the doors, the gate out front. And then a couple times we've had to have them call us back, so we left a voice message. And so that's another form of waiting. It's waiting for them to get back to you. Also just poor time of day waiting in traffic. So, trying to avoid rush hours in that town or area. And just trying to make sure that we're not spending too much time just sitting there doing nothing. First one we'll talk about is overproduction. An example might be making more food than you're eating or is needed, and therefore you have leftovers. And then you have to store the leftovers, and hopefully you brought a container to put them in. Or you could decide that you're just going to eat it, and then you're overeating, and then you feel sick or don't feel kind of full. So trying to make the right amount of food that satisfies your hunger, but not too much excess. Another overproduction might be taking out containers or supplies or items that you don't need right away, because you might realize you don't need it at all. So any time you spent doing that too early might have been wasteful. Like if I take a container out thinking I'm going to use it, and then later realize, we're not going to do that tonight, change in plans, it's starting to rain, I'm going to put that back. That's overproduction, because that's creating excess motion. And I did something early anticipating it was going to be needed, and it turns out it wasn't needed at all. So I wasted a bunch of time doing that. Another example might be you have a hammock and you want to put that up, and you don't need it right now. You're going to lay in it later, but now it starts to rain, and then you have to take it back down, or you don't use it at all. So the idea is to do it just in time. Do it right before you're going to actually use it. Another example might be bringing too much ice, and then it starts to melt. So you thought you would need more, and because you got more, it's excess. And that can lead to maybe it doesn't even fit into the coolers because you got too much. So you brought in or acquired more than you needed. Same thing with like drinks or food, more than you can handle in your coolers or that will fit in your vehicle. So it just means that we don't need it right now. So we try to do as much, buying every day for what we need that day. Not always, but you always kind of keep that in the back of my mind. Do I need it today or can I go get that tomorrow?
Let me pause for a moment to tell you about our sponsor, Creative Safety Supply. Creative Safety Supply is a great resource for free guides, infographics, and continuous improvement tools. I recommend starting with their 5S guide. It includes breakdowns of the 5 pillars, ways to begin implementing 5S, and even organization tips and color charts. From red tags to floor markings, it's all there. Download it for free at creativesafetysupply.com/5S.
And then the other O would be overprocessing. So this example would be using too much charcoal. So you need charcoal, but at some point you might go above and beyond and put more than you need, and then that's wasting, right? So overprocessing is very interesting. It seems to be a good thing up to a certain point, and then you go past that line of it's good enough, and now you're wasting time and effort. So too much charcoal, too much lighter fluid, too much firewood for cooking or heating or enjoying the fire. Maybe you put too much firewood and now it's going to last longer than you need it. Another example might be doing something that's not necessary or value added. Like if you eat burgers, let's say, do you butter and grill the buns, or do you just eat them right out of the package? So if your customers or other people in your party don't like having those buns toasted, then that could be overprocessing because it's not viewed as value added for them. And then another thing might be toppings. Maybe you put lettuce, tomatoes, onions on your burger. Well, if people don't like that, that's overprocessing. You might be overcooking the burgers. That is another example. One thing I noticed was sometimes the ranger station will have you park your vehicle and come inside to check in, which is a lot of extra emotion and activity to try and check in, where I think and I feel that they have all my information. I don't know why I have to come inside to do that. So that causes delays, and it seems like it's a lot of extra work. It's not really giving me much value. If I have questions and need help, then maybe there's value there. But to make people come in, get out of their vehicle, park, walk in, that seems like a lot of waste. Not every campsite does that, but a few of them have. Also, giving too much information at check-in. So they're overwhelming me with information that I didn't ask for or need. So that's holding up the line. That's giving me more details than I need. Some of them do a good job of asking if you've been here before, so they can judge if you need more information or not. So that's helpful. I like that. Another example might be you do make a campfire, but you're so busy doing other stuff, you're not able to sit down and enjoy it. Or you put up a shelter or a tent of some sort, but you don't use it, maybe to keep the bugs out or to keep the sun from beating down on you, but you're doing other stuff and you're not really enjoying it. Also have a lot of questions around like parking lanyards, and are those value added and necessary? Doesn't seem like anyone checks the lanyards or the little stickers to see if you're in the right spot or if you have a sticker. Many times we check in late, we don't have a lanyard or sticker. No one comes and asks us about that. So it feels like that's not necessary process to have. If there's a confusion, you go and you just figure it out. You don't need to have all this processing to label things that you're not going to look for or check. And then D would be defects. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. Some I've personally experienced, such as the example I gave earlier, electrical outlet doesn't work, or water doesn't work, or it comes out and it's like, I've had this happen a few times where the faucet just like sprays out and it's not very easy to use. So water comes out, but it's not very, there's something wrong with the faucet that it's just spraying out all over. It's getting things wet around the area and it's not really easy to use. Maybe the bathroom runs out of soap or toilet paper. Maybe you forget your campsite number, or you can't access cell service. You don't arrive on time, and so that can create a lot of problems. One of the campsites we had, we got messed up because the campsite was in one time zone and we were spending time in a different time zone. And we actually didn't know that we had switched to another time zone. So I was looking at my clock and saying, all right, we have to be there before sunset. Sunset's at 7:30 p.m. We're going to get there about 6:45. We'll be good. But I didn't realize we had switched time zones. And then when we crossed back over in the other time zone, which we had another 15, 20 minutes to drive, all of a sudden I looked at my clock and was like, where'd that hour go? So then we were going to end up arriving at 7:45. And that would be after the sunset. We tried to call, but it was already too late. People had left maybe, or you had to call before 5. So we got there and we couldn't get into the campsite. And so what we did is we parked our car and we climbed over the fence and we walked down to the next ranger residence. And we knocked on the door and said, can you let us in? Can you give us the code? It was probably a mile down the road. So we ended up getting in and it worked out okay. But just arriving late or not knowing when you're going to arrive, that can happen for a lot of different reasons. And it seems like there's not as much flexibility to handle that. And each site is a little different on how they do that. So that's a little confusing. We've tried to reach people. Sometimes no one answers. And so you leave a message and then people don't call you back. So that could be a defect. Or I don't know who to contact for help. Sometimes people have taken the wrong campsite or have taken over parts of the campsite. Another example we had where there was a central campfire or fire pit. And there were 2 campsites very close to each other. It was confusing on whose fire pit that belonged to. Was that ours? Was that theirs? They had already started a fire, so all right, I guess that's yours. But technically, it wasn't theirs when we got the information. So labeling and identifying that seems to be somewhat of a challenge in some campsites that they don't have that very clear. So you're not sure where you're supposed to park your car, which park bench is yours, stuff like that. Could also be that music is too loud. That's a defect, but what's the criteria? Sometimes that's vague, it's not clear. How do you define that? I think that's left up to interpretation, which can be problematic. You get bit up by bugs. It could be too hot or too cold at night. You could get hurt or injured. You could drive to the wrong location. Sometimes it's confusing where the campgrounds are versus the main park. Or which direction to go. There's oftentimes a lack of signage. You could forget items at home. You could book the wrong date on your reservation. You could get wrong information from the website. You could undercook your food and could cause potential illness. You could take a wrong turn at the campsite or trail and get lost or waste a bunch of time. A couple of times we brought the wrong flotation devices, so you'll bring inner tube up and they'll say we don't allow those. So then we have to take it back to our car, or we end up swimming in a wrong area that we're not supposed to be in, or I've gone snorkeling a few times and accidentally touched the coral, and then you're not supposed to do that, but it's an accident. But sometimes the water levels change and all of a sudden you're kind of stuck, or you have a problem with your mask and then you end up stepping down and not realizing where you're stepping. So those could all be defects. And there's a whole host of more examples of that. I'm sure you can think of some yourself. And then the last one is S for skills. One example might be the park ranger themselves. Are they really leveraging their knowledge and skill of that park to its fullest? They might be asked a lot of simple questions that could be made available very easily or communicated in a different way, or a pamphlet given to people. But also I think there's a lot of knowledge they have that they're not really able to communicate or share. And they might be doing a lot of manual chores, checking in guests, and that might not be the best use of their skills. Do they have an opportunity to share that knowledge and skills? I think they should have workshops and do a little overview of the park and answer questions and do a walkthrough and really trying to share the knowledge they have and get people excited and interested about that particular park. So hopefully that makes sense how the 8 types of waste pertain to camping. If you have some other examples you can think of, that'd be great to share. You can reach me through the Spotify app, and you can leave a voice message there. You can also go to biz-pi.com and go to the contact page and reach me there as well. Hope you found that useful. Let me know, and I'll try and come up with some other examples. Thanks.
Lean6sigmadefinition.com has a list of glossary items about popular process improvement terms, along with the history of Lean and Six Sigma methods, and key influencers like Dr. Edward Stemming, Henry Ford, Taiichi Ono, Shigeo Shingo, and many more. You can also learn how to access affordable Lean and Six Sigma training and certification. Visit Lean6sigmadefinition.com.